What's going on, everyone? My name is Dr. Vincent Esposito, and today we are going to be talking about intermittent fasting. So kind of what it is, the basics of it, my opinions on it, and the types of styles out there. But before we get to that, if you haven't yet, please subscribe below. I'm coming out with videos, again, twice a week. I want to continue to do this for you guys, and it's much appreciated. So let's start by talking about what exactly intermittent fasting is. So intermittent fasting, it's not a diet. It's not really restricting in terms of what food you can eat, what food you can't. It's really just, I guess I'd consider it a style of eating. So what you're doing is restricting all the food, all the calories, all the food you eat to an eating window. And those could happen a couple different ways. So there's a few common ways this is done. I think the most popular is known as the 16-8 method. So essentially, if you look at a day in 24 hours, 16 of those hours, you're not eating anything, you're fasting, and 8 hours is your window to eat. So in a more practical sense, say you have dinner at 7 o'clock p.m., you go to sleep, say you wake up, that's already 8 hours, and you don't eat again till like 11 the next morning, that's already going to hit that number. There are other common methods out there. One's known as the 5-2 method, where essentially you're eating normally for 5 days, and then you are strictly fasting the other 2 days, meaning you're going 24-hour stretches with not eating, like twice a week. Another popular one you might have heard of, especially if you found this channel, is 1 meal a day, which is exactly what it sounds like. You're just eating one large meal at one sitting. And then there's other kind of forms you could play with. One I know of is just called spontaneous meal skipping. Has a lot to do with kind of intuitive eating, kind of just, if you're not hungry, just don't eat. That's really more of kind of an intuitive eating type of approach to it, but still counts as fasting as long as you're in that fasting window. There's a couple of misconceptions when it comes to fasting in general. One of which, and probably the one I see the most, is that it is not a diet, and it's definitely not a license to eat whatever you want just because you're fasting, right? So it doesn't mean you get those processed foods, the junk foods and stuff in that 8-hour window just because you're allowed to eat. Like, you still want to focus on the proper methods of nutrition, and I'll link my video above on nutrition so you can kind of refer back to like my basics and what I do when I work with people. One of the reasons I do it actually is because it saves me money. Now, I've never been a big breakfast eater, even as I was growing up, so it was very easy for me to skip breakfast most days. I still do it probably most days. I wouldn't say every day. I'll get into the reasons why a little later, but that's kind of why I stick with it that way. It's easier on my wallet, and to be honest, I'm not going to be eating breakfast a lot anyway, so I generally just wait and have a bigger lunch and a bigger dinner. So why might you want to try fasting? Well, there's a few benefits to it, actually. So a couple of the few ones are they help regulate key hormones. A couple, especially if you're looking to build muscle, are mTOR and HGH, human growth hormone. Now, when we're fasting, when you're in that fasting window, levels of those hormones actually spike rapidly. So if you're looking to build muscle, that's a great simple way to kind of boost that process is by intermittent fasting. Another benefit of fasting is it actually helps with insulin resistance and insulin control. So giving your body kind of the break it needs and allowing our metabolisms to kind of regulate itself will actually help with insulin resistance versus constantly eating and snacking kind of throughout the day. We get all these kind of insulin spikes and drops, especially if you're eating the wrong types of food. So if you're simply not eating, you're not going to get that, and you're giving your body a chance to kind of regulate in a way. Some studies also show that fasting from time to time actually increases our microbiome, our gut microbiome diversity, which is huge because the more we learn about our gut microbiome, the more that we see that when they're kind of out of balance and out of whack, that's when a lot of different chronic diseases occur and kind of come in. So fasting from time to time can help kind of regulate and bring that whole environment back down to homeostasis, which is really important for a ton of not only gut diseases, but other systemic diseases as well, including things like insulin resistance, metabolic syndrome, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. There's a ton of different ways this can be helpful. It kind of allows our guts to go through a sort of spring cleaning. So that might be a reason to try this from time to time. Now, fasting has a ton of benefits, but it's not the only tool we have when it comes to improving our health. It's simply a tool in the toolbox. Now, do I think everyone should fast every day? Absolutely not. I think it's very much a trial and error process, and it might not be for you. Now, there are some people who I would suggest shouldn't fast at all. So if you happen to be, pregnant or a child, I wouldn't necessarily consider fasting. I would stick to, maybe the more traditional 3 meals a day. Another big issue when it comes to intermittent fasting could be those who might have some sort of thyroid issues or are estrogen dominant, or there's some other kind of hormonal imbalances. It might not be worth it to fast every day because they could kind of throw those a little bit out of whack. So again, might not be something to do every single day. That doesn't mean it won't be beneficial necessarily, but it could make things worse if it's done long term. So I kind of fall in the middle when it comes to intermittent fasting. Now, I generally suggest if you could, try to do it maybe somewhere between like 2 to 3 or 2 to 4 days per week. Kind of give it a shot. Again, it gives our bodies a chance to kind of reset too, with food not kind of being in the picture, especially now when food's always kind of in abundance and available, and so often we are kind of just mindlessly eating, whether we're watching TV or we're just out with friends. We're just eating when we're not hungry, and really finding those cues and understanding your body in general is going to make a difference going forward. I tend to fast probably, I guess, 4 to 5 days a week, most likely, usually during the week, sometimes on weekends too. It kind of depends for me, but I'm usually in that 16 to 18 hour range where I'm fasting. I'll generally just have lunch and dinner, usually between like 12 and 8 or 12 and 7, or depending on how the schedules work that day. But that's kind of how I like doing it most days. Again, not necessarily like glued to it and doing it every day, but most days, just because it helps me feel better. I've noticed it boosts my energy levels. I'm able to think clearer. It does help with weight loss. It's almost kind of a way to help restrict calories as well. So it kind of helps in that sense too. So there are some benefits. There are some situations where I wouldn't necessarily use it, but you got to weigh those in each situation. I do recommend trying it though. The first few days are a little tough, but kind of once you get used to it and understand hunger cues and thirst cues and things of that nature, it really makes a difference going forward. But that's all we have for today. So if you found this information helpful, or you want me to elaborate on something, please comment below. I will be more than happy to kind of answer any questions you have down there. If you haven't yet and you've liked this, please subscribe to the channel. It really means a lot. And leave a like if you really enjoy what we're talking about. And again, want to keep this conversation open and make it a dialogue with you guys. So looking forward to hearing what you have to say. And until next time, take care.